Hi, my name's Craig Rzyński, and I run a shop on creativemarket.com, and it sells design assets with a Japanese flavor. And the most popular asset is Hanko, the rubber stamp action for Illustrator. Hanko is a handcraft in Japan and around the world that applies an illustration to rubber and then uses ink to produce a stamp effect. So I've downloaded the asset to my downloads folder, and now I'll run through the process of using the Hanko action. So I'll go into Illustrator. This is a fresh install of Illustrator, so the workspace might look a little bit different to yours. I will go into my downloads folder. I've got the Hanko stamp. I'm going to open the hanko.ai file. Okay. So probably the easiest way to create Hanko is to copy your objects, your shapes, your artwork into this hanko.ai file, apply the action, apply the image trace preset, and then to expand the artwork so you get editable vector artwork. The reason you can't just open up your existing artwork file and start loading the Hanko action and start applying the Hanko action to your artwork is that you need the swatch, the Hanko swatch, for this to work. Unfortunately, swatches aren't persistent across files. And what that means is if you load the Hanko swatch into your swatches palette, when you open a new file, it won't be there. And that's why we use this particular file, or if you know that you're going to be using your Hanko action in your own file, you can actually just simply load that swatch into that file, and then you'll be able to use it within that file. And I'll show you how to do that as well. But first of all, let's follow this process. We open up our hanko.ai file. What we need to do is load the action for the Hanko action into Illustrator. Thankfully, that is persistent. So obviously, once you load that action, it will be in your actions panel whenever you need it. So I'm going to do that now. I'll go to actions and load actions. Here in my downloads folder, in the Hanko stamp folder, is my Hanko action there, hanko.aia. I'm going to open that. And now I have it. The next thing we need to do is create the image trace preset. And what this does is it sets the way that the texture is applied to the shapes. And I've created settings that are optimum for getting that Hanko effect. We're going to save those settings we put in here as a preset. And that preset is persistent, which means that if you open a new file, you will be able to use that image trace preset without having to load it every time. Okay, all right, so we've loaded the action, and now we need something to play it on, and I will use this. Paste that onto a new layer, and I'll just set the color to black. I will play the action. Now, the first thing you'll see is the roughen dialog, and I recommend a setting between 0.1 to 1% for that. Okay, so it's applied. And what we're seeing here is a texture, an image of the texture within those shapes. So what we need to do, we actually want to trace that image so it turns into vector artwork. And to do that, we have particular settings that we want here. We need to create that preset. So we set the threshold to 80. Set the paths to 100, the corners to 100, set the noise to 5. We check ignore white. And what we're going to do before we trace that, we're going to save this as a new preset. We'll call it Hanko. Trace that. That's okay. Obviously, this generates a lot of vector paths. If you're finding you're running slow, you could create a second preset, for instance, that didn't have quite as high fidelity. It might have 80% for paths, 80% for corners. The effect you get there might be completely acceptable for what you're trying to do, and it won't slow your machine down. Okay, so the next thing we need to do, if we go to view outlines, you can see that we don't actually have the vector paths that we need. To do that, we need to go up to Object and expand. Okay, now that we've expanded it, we have vector information there, and that means that we can go into colors and apply any color we want, and there we go, we've applied it. So what to do if you have a file that you're already working in, a new file, and you want to apply the Hanko action to an object in there. Let's pull this artwork, for instance, pull this vector artwork here, and let's work out what we need to do. So we already have the Hanko action in Illustrator. We've got that. We have the Hanko preset that we created. We've got that. What we're missing is the swatch. And to do that, we go into our swatches panel, go open swatch library, other library, and we'll go to our downloads folder, find that Hanko stamp folder, and we load in the hanko.ai file. This is the file that we're just working out of. That's how we can load that into the swatches panel. We just open that and it will find the swatch, the Hanko swatch there. So it loads it into a separate panel like this. If you want to add it to your own swatches, you just click and drag that. Important step here though is that when you do drag it to your own panel, swatches panel, it renames it, and the action won't work with this name. It needs to be called Hanko for the action to be able to find it. So I'm just going to double click it, and in my pattern options up here, I'm going to call it Hanko, and that's all I need to do. So that's done. Delete that. I'll paste in my artwork, and let's try it out. Okay, I'm going to load the Hanko preset. I'll expand, and you can see that that's worked. Okay, all right. So what do I need to do if I have multiple colors, and when I try and apply the Hanko action, I lose those colors? So how do I preserve the color? To do that, the easiest way is just to make a copy, use those as your color reference, apply the Hanko action, the preset. Okay, I'll expand these. I'll separate them. And then I'll use those as references to recolor my artwork. What you'll find is if you have objects overlapping like this, it will combine those two shapes together. So you either need to separate overlapping shapes onto different layers, or physically separate them like that before applying it, and then combine them again. Okay, that's it. I hope that helped. And if you have any questions, please ask me on creativemarket.com. Happy to answer them and help you out. Happy Hankoing.